Becoming a Christian doesn't mean you'll never doubt God. The gospel actually calls it unbelief. It's a big deal because it pulls us away from God. So in this video, I want to look at how we should pray when we sense doubt rising in us, and then offer 3 gospel reminders to help us fight unbelief. But before I look at how to pray, let me quickly recap my other video on unbelief. Hebrews chapter 3 verse 12 cautions us against having a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. According to that verse, unbelief is an impulse that begins in our hearts and minds that leads us away from God. Unbelief makes us think God smells bad and that something else smells better. So it keeps us from involving God in our lives, period, or it keeps us from inviting God into a certain part of our lives. Unbelief turns away from God. When Christians struggle with unbelief, it feels like doubt. It isn't necessarily doubting that God exists, but it's doubting that God sees us, cares about us, or can help us. We might doubt His goodness, we might doubt His power, or we might doubt His relevance. For me, and I think many share this with me, I can feel doubt rise in me because God seems so still and quiet. His timing can be so confusing and even frustrating. And He seems to do nothing, and then when He seems to actually get up and do something, it's not what we want Him to do. So doubts arise. We get irritated, so we try to bypass God's path or God's method or God's timing. When you feel that happening in you, I think we have a great prayer from a desperate dad in Mark chapter 9. His son was actually possessed by a demon. He was so sick, and he needed God's touch. And the father said to Jesus, "Look, if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." Did you hear the doubt? Jesus, do you care? Jesus, are you able? It's a tough spot to be in. But Jesus met the father in his doubt, and he replied to him saying, "Anything is possible for the one who believes." And the father exclaimed, "I believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." Mark chapter 9, verse 24. And then Jesus healed the boy. Now the point of the story is not that we'll get what we want if we just believe hard enough. Not everyone gets healing or the happy ending in this life. God does promise Jesus' followers eternal bliss after death, which is certain, but that must wait. But the point I want to draw from this story in Mark chapter 9 is that Jesus invites us to take our doubt to Him and bring our request before Him. Jesus wants to work in our hearts as we want Him to work on our needs. So in the midst of our prayers, we take our unbelief and put it before Him and ask Him to work on it. He may fix the situation. He may fix your perspective. He may fix your heart. It might be quick. It might be slow. But through the whole process, doubt wants to pull you away from God. And that story in Mark chapter 9 tells us not to let doubt drive Jesus out of your life, but to let doubt draw you to the feet of Jesus to increase your faith. So that's the biblical path for praying when we feel doubt and unbelief swell up in our hearts. But there are 3 gospel truths to weaken our doubt and bolster our faith. As a quick gospel reminder, because of His death and resurrection, Jesus immediately calls us out of something that's deadly and into something that's life-giving. I'm using this framework to address unbelief, which eats away at our soul and leads to all kinds of problems in our life. I want to spotlight 3 gospel truths that point us toward what's life-giving, which is faith, a deep trust in Jesus that leads to a close walk with Him. These pillars of truth remind us of the goodness of God, the power of God, and the nearness of God. And I tied these reminders to the 3 reasons unbelief often arises in us. So first, we doubt God's goodness. We say, God doesn't love me anymore, or God doesn't care about my happiness, or God doesn't want what's best for me. To help us trust God's goodness, we should remember Jesus' death. Romans chapter 5 verse 8 says, "But God demonstrates His own love for us in this: While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Remember the cross where God was never more still or silent, and yet there his love was never more active or loud. His goodness shines through it all. It always wins. Trust it. Wait on him and look to him, even when life isn't so good. Second, we doubt God's power. We say, God can't do anything about this, or God can't help with this. To help us trust God's power, we should remember Jesus' resurrection. Death did not have the final word. Jesus beat death. Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 6:14 wrote, "By his power God raised the Lord from the dead, and he will raise us also." God uses his power not only for Jesus' good, but for our good as well. God is able to help you in your situation. He knows it better than you do, and he can come through for you in a way you never anticipated. If you're doubting his power, take your doubt to him. Fight unbelief by reminding yourself of the resurrection. Third, we doubt God's nearness. We say God doesn't have any opinions on this, or God has no insight on this, or this is too trivial for God. He's somewhere else. To help us trust God's nearness and relevance, we should remember the Spirit within us. When you come to Jesus, you receive the Holy Spirit. You have unfettered access to God. Building on this truth, Paul wrote in Romans chapter 8, verse 26, "The Spirit helps us in our weakness." The Spirit helps us pray. He helps us act. He guides us. Unbelief makes you think God doesn't matter or that he's distant. But remember that you have the Spirit. He's right there. And it's always a solid idea to involve God in the matter, regardless of the matter. Well, that's enough for this video. I'm Aaron Massey. I've been following Jesus and teaching his word for more than 15 years. If you heard something that was useful, do me a favor to like and subscribe so that others can find teaching just like this. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.